Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with Maria Saras-Voutsinas. She is the media maverick and all about free speech, fighting for equality and human rights. Maria, how are you?
I am great, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited and jazzed that you're here. So you are such an amazing human being, and it's really my pleasure to be able to showcase you with all our friends out in the universe. And I really would love it if you could share a little bit about, who you are and what you do.
I would be so excited to do that. I hate talking about myself, but love talking about what I do. I've had the honor and privilege of being the executive director of the National Ethnic Press and Media Council of Canada for many, many years. And it's a role that I kind of fell into. I want to say we're going back a good 15 years now. However, ethnic media has been a part of my life since birth.
Yeah.
My fabulous father has been in the ethnic media space since he came to Canada as a political refugee.
Okay.
Over 50 years ago. And he realized at that point that there was a need for third language media. Back when my dad, Thomas Saras, came to Canada, immigration was flourishing and beautiful. And, a spark went off where he said, you know what? Third language Canadians, they deserve to have news in a language other than English and French.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's still just as important.
Absolutely, if not more, right? Because we have so many languages being spoken in Canada, right? Let alone Toronto.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In this segment of media has just grown and grown. And especially for me, it's so wonderful to see, people, community leaders embracing their heritage and making sure that reliable news is getting to their readership.
Yeah, totally. The thing is, the reliable news is really important.
Yes.
One of the things I want to talk about is that in the world that we live in, where there's a lot of access to information, oftentimes misinformation, and people putting stuff out that looks like news but isn't news, and they don't even know how to source. Is this a reliable source or not? Is this biased? Is it not biased? Those critical analytical skills, I think, is being lost, or it's being drowned out. And so we know, I know that, with regards to your specialization in ethnic media, the entire media landscape is also being impacted by this. Yeah. Can you speak to some of those challenges?
Absolutely. And it's definitely something that keeps me up at night.
Okay.
I hate to bring this up, but I'm going to.
Okay.
When the pandemic began, this is where we kind of had to stop and go, whoa, right? There's a big demographic, or the demographic we don't necessarily just focus on, but it's a big portion of it are seniors.
Okay. So,
they're reading stuff online and saying, but I read this, and is this how it is? Is this true? And you almost have to say, hang on a second, we got to stop here.
Yeah.
Right? Let's read and follow the people that you know and trust. And I get it. There's so much information out there. Yeah. Everyone has an opinion. So this is where, the whole idea of ethics and, making sure that you're not misleading. Misinformation, disinformation is not part of the package. And, our organization is very, very strict when it comes to be careful what's being put out there, because there's a difference when you're writing opinion.
Yes.
And there's a difference when you're writing fact.
Yes.
So again, a very, very difficult, it's a challenge. It's hard.
Yeah.
Right? And we have to depend on community members to say, wait a second, I just read this in an outlet. Is this true? And, you kind of sit there and you struggle, and you have to rein in, certain people and what their opinions are. But then you also don't want to kill people's beliefs and whatnot as well.
So, what do you do in that? What do you do in a situation like that? Right? Because even to the point of what you're talking about, seniors, very important population who didn't necessarily grow up with this technology. And so we did see during the pandemic an extreme rise in scams and targeting senior populations because of this. And so that's one thing that is kind of like an offshoot of that. But when it comes to information that is getting out there, misinformation, disinformation, protecting accredited or real journalistic sources is really important. But how do people determine that? How do people even know? How does the common public know? Because right now, anybody can circumvent that. You say that you have strict guidelines, you have a strong sense of ethics. Well, someone says, well, I don't want to play by those rules. Wait a minute, I'm just going to create my own website and I'm going to create my own handle on whatever social media platform and just start espousing stuff. So in that vein, how does media function, survive, and overcome that?
So the good news is the majority of ethnic media today have been around since the beginning of time. So we're going back years and years, and they've built that trust in community, and it becomes generational.
Right.
So, grandma's reading the newspaper, mom's reading it, and then the kids will read it.
Right.
So you've got that trust in something that's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
With the newer outlets that are being formed, and a lot of them right now are going online, and we get that. We depend on community members, so the stalwarts in the community that we've known forever, and we know are ethical and are fact-based,
right,
and are, they're not going to beat around the bush with stuff. It's all safety and the information they're providing. We have to depend on them to let us know, okay, you know what? This person isn't here to stir up any controversy.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But it's tough. It's still extremely difficult. I see it in my own ethnic community too.
Okay.
Right? Like you've got the guys that have been around forever and gals. And then you'll have that little kind of pop up out of nowhere and you're like, whoa, wait a second here. I can't control it. I can't say to you, stop it. But I can make sure that I use my voice and my power to make sure that the community is aware. Be careful
of the information of what's being written and
Absolutely.
How it's being written.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's great that we have that. As things are shifting one of the things I know and I read about, and even all the major newspapers, print. Is print going out?
Talking about this breaks my heart. This print is still extremely important. Again, for our seniors, because they're going to go to their ethnic bakery. They're going to go to their ethnic grocery store, buy their stuff. They're going to pick up their copy of the newspaper. Excuse me. Unfortunately, a lot of the older generation isn't yet as comfortable getting on their smartphones or their tablets and reading the news. So having that at their fingertips is important. However, print costs have gone through the roof.
Okay.
So advertising has gone down.
Okay.
So the stream of money coming in, which in ethnic media especially, we used to laugh. We were flourishing at one point because communities support communities.
Yeah.
So my ethnic bakeries were putting out ads. Your dealerships, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so wonderful to see that support. But slowly but surely, it all just started to crumble. And then the pandemic just completely brought us to the point of near collapse.
Okay.
So it's tough because if you can't make the bills,
how can you run a paper?
And
if you don't run a paper, how do you get into the hands of your readership?
It's dangerous. It really, really is dangerous. It's such an important aspect of society.
So what can people do? Or does the government step in? Like what happens?
So the governments, I'll be honest with you, have always been our savior. And the federal governments, leading back to as far as Stephen Harper when he was prime minister, they value the ethnic media.
Mm-hmm.
A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian.
Yeah.
And there have been so many wonderful support in the past. and especially more so over the pandemic, I will credit this government for saving the industry. They did.
Okay.
They literally saved our industry. We had members calling us in tears saying, I can't do this anymore. I can't afford it. I've got no advertisements coming in. I've taken out a second mortgage on my home. I've had to take out loans.
Yeah.
And I was frozen because I was helpless. There was literally, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And then I called a very good friend of mine, David Valentin of Liaison Strategies, a wicked lobbyist. And I cried and I said, David, I'm sad. I don't know what to do anymore. And David stepped in and he's like, we're booking meetings. We're getting all of this together. And we would spend 12 hours a day speaking with members of parliament from, every party you can think of with our pleas. And the federal government said, you know what? We're creating this amazing fund to help you through this rough patch through the Canadian Periodical Funding model called Special Measures for Journalism.
That's awesome.
It was a godsend.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Maria, for doing that.
Love you, David.
Yeah. No, that's the power of lobbying. That's the power of knowing the levers to push policy, to influence, like, hey, take a look at this, put a spotlight on something and say, this is an issue that matters to community members. And with ethnic media, I think oftentimes it's so community oriented. And when the community is hurting, everybody hurts.
Yeah.
Right. And
absolutely.
COVID was, it didn't matter where you were from. It impacted everybody. But I know that there was, in our conversations, that there were always lots of challenges with survival, right? Like, I will say I am a very proud subscriber of the Toronto Star. I get a paper copy and I love it and I read it. But I also realize that my daughter's friends may not actually have a paper at their home. Right. And that's because they might read it off of their tablets or what have you. And that's just a different interaction mode. But we do need to protect it. Right. Like, and I don't think it's just our seniors, because I think, one of the things that I know that's very important as a parent is we have a no devices at our table when we eat.
Yes.
But if you use it as your news source, so you're having breakfast and you're on your phone reading the newspaper, your child can't tell what the difference is. They just think, oh, you're just on your phone. But in our house, we model reading the paper and everybody's always reading, right? I mean, it's not to make it right or wrong, but I just see, like, when I see my daughter, even if she's reading, like, she's like got this paper, I just think it's wonderful. And then my 2-year-old is like, gets a little book and she pulls it out to read. It's really important. And I share this because I worry about the loss of print, and I hope it makes a comeback. Because I remember when the Globe, when they did that one color print and signed up for 10 years, people were like, what? The industry is about to go down and you just signed up for a 10-year, like, front color copy of, a full spread paper. They were like, yeah, we're investing in that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I appreciate it. I really do. And our friends over in the mainstream media are in the exact same predicament that we are in. And I have many conversations with the leadership over in mainstream on, ways that we're going to keep this alive. And there's a lot of great stuff happening out there in the universe. Yeah. Bill C-18 is one of them, right? Yeah. The Online News Act, which we're modeling this off of what happened in Australia.
Yeah.
And I had the honor and privilege to speak with a few publishers in Australia just a couple weeks ago, and to see that, it brought life back into the industry, which is great.
Yeah.
And I think with that, hopefully it's extremely important to me. It's extremely important to you and a lot of our friends and family that are watching this right now, that print media does still continue going. Because what? I'm like you. Having a newspaper in my hand is a lot different than me, on a tablet. I do it out of necessity, but it is really, really something. And I think we have to be innovative and think of ways to keep it alive and fruitful. And that is a whole other beast.
So isn't that one of the things that you're working on, like trying to emulate what Australia has done?
Absolutely.
Like, because that's something that's very important in terms of protecting the brain trust, protecting the knowledge, protecting the information so that the funds will flow back to the source.
Absolutely.
Can you speak a little bit about it more articulately? What is Bill 17?
So at the end of the day, big tech has come in and they're reaping the rewards of online advertisements. I get it. If I'm a business and I'm going to get, the best bang for my buck by going through Google, Facebook ads.
Yeah.
A lot of times we kind of stop and don't think of the bigger picture. So these guys are taking in all of this amazing money through advertisements.
Which is why the print papers were like, we're losing advertising revenue.
Absolutely.
Because it's going digital.
It's going digital. And you know what? They're taking in all this ad revenue. They're not producing any content. So all us content creators and journalists and what are you going to do? You can't take water from a stone.
Yeah.
So it may seem a little harsh in terms of how we're going about this. It's not. We're here, again, to protect an extremely important part of democracy and society.
Yeah.
If I can't pay my journalists, I'm in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Do you think we're close to getting something like what Australia has?
I really do.
That's awesome.
Currently in the Senate right now. So it's being debated in the Senate. It's looking pretty good.
So this could be a game changer for print media.
Absolutely. Well, more so
Or
for
media.
online media.
Online media,
and,
right.
But if you're striking deals with Google and Facebook and, you're able to at least get 25, 30% of your costs covered, then you're going to be able to focus on, because the majority of outlets have an online presence as long as a print presence.
So it'll supplement in some way, shape, or form. That's how we hope it'll pan out.
I'm hoping so.
That's so cool. I mean, and I'm really glad to hear that because, without media, freedom of speech, different opinions, ethical presentation of information and everything, like where would society be?
Exactly. We need things that spark our interest.
Yeah.
We need to learn. I mean, as humans, we're constantly learning and evolving.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to say this a million times, fact-based information is important.
Okay. So here's a tool that I'm going to ask for you to think about. So yes, there's been a loss of revenues, but it looks like we're going to, reclaim that lost revenue so that the people who are the content creators are getting the funds that they so rightly deserve. And that's very important, which will help maintain the media.
Yes.
So that's really important. So staying alive, number one.
Yes.
But number two, when you think about the readership, what are tools or tips for people to learn how to become more aware of what is real information? How to be a critical reader, maybe. That's what I mean. Like when people are reading, there's so much content. Like, is there anything to help advise people of be aware of what you're reading and think about it? Because I think it's the critical lens of how people interpret information.
Yeah.
This might be pretty complex. I don't know, but I think that I have worked with students and they're quoting stuff, which is like a blog, which is a personal opinion. And I'm like, that's not fact. Like, where did you get your facts from? And they think it's real because they just Googled it and it's a source that's not credible. I'm like, blog vacation love or something like that. And I'm like, that's not a real source.
It's a huge, huge issue. Huge. And I think it's bigger than you and me in trying to figure this one out.
Yeah.
Again, in our case is you've got a pretty loyal readership and they know, if I go to this source, I'm keeping it real and I know that I'm going to get information that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, this is a battle that I don't even know where to begin.
Yeah.
Right. I do my part. I do my part in informing my community.
Yeah.
This is what you're going to do. This is who you're going to go to.
Yeah.
But people are, and especially in moments of weakness.
Yeah. People take advantage of that.
Of course they do. Manipulation is awful. it's awful. And it makes me really, really angry. So my blood pressure goes up because I'm thinking, how is this possible?
Yeah. I don't know. And that's why I think like with media, like we can be our own content creators, right? Like we have a whole industry of people who are influencers who state their opinion and people just follow.
Yeah.
Right. And it's great. It's wonderful that people can just use their device and, speak to reach everyone and anyone who's willing to listen. And they've got their soapbox. But what happens if that's, not always used for, I don't know, like something that is positive? I don't know. Right. And so I guess for me, I come back to thinking like, how can we help people sort out the difference of quality, right? Content, or being able to discern like, this is really left. This is really right. This is really so far out there. Like, this is not, because we are also in a world where there's all these SEO engines where they serve up. It's like confirmation bias. You just serve up the same thing over and over again because you searched it.
Yeah.
So it's actually terrifying how media is consumed, because it can take you from something that might be moderate and go from one extreme to another extreme. And it's different. Like when I was growing up, we had a TV and the whole family watched TV together.
Absolutely.
We didn't have, and now fast forward now, my kid has her own avatar looking at her own shows, and it serves up shows that she wants to watch. Absolutely. Right. So it's very customized. And then we might have this, like, the same phone, but the information being served up on it is so different. Yeah. And I don't know, like, is there any sort of critical lens? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know, Maria.
This is a really, really tough one. I think it's important for us, the savvier folks, just keep talking about it. Yeah. Right? There's a lot of shady characters, even in like mainstream society, that, you and I would just be like, whoa. But a lot of other people are just like, wait a second.
Yeah.
What they're saying is making sense, right? Yeah. Moments of weakness.
Yeah.
And then you go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And it's so very difficult, unfortunately, to pull people out of that.
So how do we protect media? So we have one tool here which is a bill that helps redivert funds back into media, which is step number one. But what are other ways in which we can support journalists? Because I know so many journalists who are like, oh, it's so tough. It's so tough to stay. And I see a lot of people who have these aspirations to be these writers and these journalists, but there is a burnout rate.
And, I blame a lot of that as well on social media.
Okay. Why?
We're seeing a lot of our journalists, especially in the mainstream, the online attacks, especially against females.
Okay.
And female people of color.
Yeah.
Is unbelievable. You could be the strongest human being physically and mentally, and over time that's going to weigh down on you, especially with anonymous troll accounts coming out after, right? People have agendas.
Yes.
And they are cruel. There's only so much. We also need protections. We need to protect our journalists as well against this. And a lot of newsrooms are doing that. And I'm really, really proud to see that.
Okay.
However, it's a tough gig. It's a really, really tough gig. And I follow all of these, these wonderful, magnetic females that are, out there reporting the truth.
Yeah.
And then just getting beaten down. And there's only so much that I think any human can take.
Yeah. Well, there's the story, right? I think it's this woman, she's down south where she's Korean, and, she, during New Year's, I think she was reporting and she was reporting about how, and so for New Year's, this is what people will be drinking, which is collard greens and whatever, as a traditional thing. She was, as a Korean American, I'm going to have soup. And it was a woman called in and left a message saying, you're being very Asian. And then she churned this, Michelle Lee was the anchor, and she basically turned it around, made a social media post about it, and then was like very Asian, and now has created and churned it around because, I mean, we know that during COVID that there was a lot of anti-Asian sentiments. Yeah. And so she was subject to it as a media personality, where someone was attacking her for like, how dare you talk a little bit about about your Asianness on American TV. And she's like, wait a minute, I am American. This is a part of that fabric.
Absolutely.
And then she churned it and made it a whole entire movement. And I remember I was like, this is awesome. And now she has hashtag very Asian. And you know, like people are like kind of stepping up and claiming space online as a result of it. So yeah, trolling is really hard. And I don't think that's a success story for everyone, because we also see that not only is it in media, but we also see it in the political world, where we see lots of women who are like, I'm stepping down. It's just become too much. And the vitriol, like, and what does that mean? But I think that it's true, like the trolling, the anonymousness of it, the people with an agenda, it's very difficult to curtail that. And what measures I don't know, expect you to have the answer to this, but it's like, how do we protect people? How do we protect, the people who are willing to put their face out there versus a troll? Excuse me.
We're singing songs of coughing. I love it. Look, at the end of the day, I think it's important that we, that small little minority, really, really loud people that feel comfortable attacking, which I'll never understand. Look, there's that saying, hurt people, which is, I get it. It's wrong.
Yeah.
But it's up to those of us on the outside to be louder.
Yeah, fair enough.
And it takes energy, and I get that. And it's scary because when you're defending on social media, the attacks then can be directed at you, as a supporter of someone, just like, hold on, buddy. I'll be honest. I tend to stay out of stuff like this just because I'm exhausted. Like when I was during the pandemic and when vaccines became available, I was out there left, right, and center talking about the benefits, talking about community, why this is important to community. It wasn't a me issue. It was a community issue. Yeah. Protecting our healthcare workers. Yeah. Protecting our seniors. Mm-hmm. And oh my goodness, the abuse that I received was unbelievable. Just unbelievable. And there came a point where I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Maybe I should stop. I didn't. But it was exhausting. So I can't even imagine these wonderful, brilliant people receiving this day after day after day. And that's why we've got to be out there and, protect
rally around and support them when they need it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the smallest ask, but it's so important.
Yeah. And and that's like, you can report comments or you can do those things, but it just feels like it's not enough.
No, I honestly don't think that even social media companies even really pay attention to that anymore, right? Mm. We're seeing it with Twitter.
Well, yeah.
And it's it really, really is scary and it's frustrating. And the last thing we want to do is have just another thing, affect people's mental health.
Well, I think that's something that we see, right? Like mental health has been acutely been impacted over COVID, and it's now exacerbated.
Absolutely.
Because the wraparound supports aren't there. And if our media personalities who are willing to put their face in front of a message, in front of a value system, in front of whatever, are being attacked, and then they disappear, then what do we have left?
Exactly.
Right?
So it's scary. What a scary thought, eh?
It's totally scary. That's why, like, when you say, well, media is on the brink of what? Like disappearing? Of, it just seems like now everything's free form. Everybody can just do it. But we need the leaders. We need the journalists who can lead the way to say, well, this is how we do it. This is how you can be a professional about it. I don't know.
Again, it's a really, really tough conversation to have because like in any industry, innovation is important.
Yeah,
right?
Innovation.
So, we can sit here and scream and cry and say, we don't have the advertising revenue. All right, let's think. And, we're trying that with whatever energy and effort we've got left in us. Things are working.
Yeah.
There has to be more. But I think it's collective. I think it's bigger than just, media industry folks.
Right.
It's everyone. Like I need you as a fabulous member of the community to keep supporting the Toronto Star, to subscribe to, whatever ethnic media outlet is out there. In any way, you've got a business, put in that advertisement.
Right.
These are important ways to be able to keep this sector alive and growing. And it's tough as people build back after what the pandemic caused financially to a lot of folks. I get it. And we're slowly starting to see the pickup.
Yeah.
And it's great to see because when one person's doing well, then
other people slowly start doing that.
Exactly.
So are there like some positive examples of thinking outside of the box where people have tried to like innovate and create new ways of attracting new readership or sustaining important relevance in a community?
So there's a lot of our members that, still physically produce a newspaper.
Yeah.
And then have said, wait a second, I'm going to do a YouTube show.
Okay.
Right. So you've got this younger generation that's now watching this YouTube show or listening to this online radio program or a podcast.
Yeah.
That is like, wait a second, this is great. Like this is a great community leader.
Yeah.
That's doing this. And then we'll take a subscription out to the newspaper as well.
Oh, cool. So there's like, it just like
a family. It's this amazing family. And I'm seeing that more in communities where immigration is still quite steady.
Okay.
And you've got younger generations coming over as well.
Okay.
And, English may be a second language. So there is a grasp of it. So we're also seeing a lot of that too. A lot of bilingualism.
Yes.
Right? So I'm primarily a Greek newspaper with English and sometimes French will be incorporated in that. It's incredible because you need to get the younger generation to be invested.
Yeah.
Or it's all going to just be, why am I here? What am I doing?
I mean, in some ways, I actually feel like it's quite hopeful because people are consuming content at such high values and there's so many options and so many choices that it forces people to be creative.
Yeah.
And if there is a natural following, the translation of following this anchor, following this journalist, and then subscribing to the local community paper or whatever it is really important. Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, this takes me back to communities, right? Like the media is an extension of the community, or the media helps create the community identity, and they're all fueling each other. Like they are part of that, and we need each other.
We do.
And so it's like, I love that. Like that there's now that we're, the first wave of major immigration really created this third language need, the multilingualism. But now we have bilingual folks or multilingual folks. And it just feels like sometimes when you walk in Toronto, what's so amazing about Toronto is that people just move in from English to Greek to, French to, like Chinese or whatever, like all these different languages that are just like moving in really fluidly.
Absolutely. Which is so wonderful to see. Right.
Yeah.
And it's such a celebration of our diversity and our, abilities to celebrate who we are. Like I'm a first generation Canadian myself, my children, obviously second generation. And, I'm pushing it even with them, how important it is to have an understanding and a grasp of your culture.
Yeah.
And that includes language as well.
Yeah. And I think that's it's sort of hit and miss. I feel like we know that we're part of other, like my children, we are in a bilingual, we speak English mostly primarily, but we don't speak my Chinese language all the time because it's not around and it's not fluid enough. And so I worry about that, right? And I think we need to say that as well.
Absolutely. That's huge. And I give a lot of props to grandparents, because especially grandparents that are established immigrants in Canada have been here for a while.
Yeah.
And just at least in my situation, my parents, my in-laws were constantly speaking to my children in Greek, exposing them to that. And it's worked, because now they're adults and they
can speak it.
They can
understand it.
They can definitely understand it. Speaking it is funny, but you know what? I always applaud them, because I'm like, good for you. Do it. Get on that app, that Duolingo app, and they're learning it, because it's their identity. It's so important to all of us.
Well, it comes down to why we need to help support ethnic media, right? Because it actually shows a vibrant community, still demands it. Yeah. And that's what makes Toronto amazing, is the diversity. And so it's like language. It takes us to a whole other piece about how important it is in our own homes to support multilingualism.
Absolutely.
And I even see this on a lot of our shows. Like, I love watching CBC, because they really have put a focus on showing cultures and all of like shows that don't focus primarily on the fact that, oh, this is a diverse show, but it's a part of it. It's normalized.
Absolutely. And it's so great, right?
I'm like, if only I had this when I was growing up. Honestly, we've come a long way.
Seriously. But it's just like nowadays. And I just see it as, it's just kind of like, it's an extension. It all just makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. And you know what? This is such an important stat that I need to put out there. Like 25% of Canadians, and this is according to StatsCan, 25% of Canadians identify with a language other than English or French. That's a huge number.
That is huge.
Huge.
25% of
25% of Canadians. And this is StatsCan. This is not Maria fake newsing anything. These are like real numbers. It's a huge number out there. So
what do we need to do then? Like, give me some like thoughts, like, in terms of what that means.
Listen, support your local community newspaper.
Yeah.
Whatever your heritage is, whatever you identify with in your lineage, it's important to reach out, even if it's primarily written in a language other than English or French.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Just putting the support out there, if you're able to, is going to be huge in the way of advertisement.
Yeah.
In the way of subscription.
Yeah.
These are little things that mean a lot, right? Every little bit helps.
Are subscriptions expensive for ethnic community papers?
It depends on the outlet, but it's not. It's nothing that would make someone go, "Whoa, I can't do this."
Yeah.
So, and a lot of community newspapers are free.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of it. That's why when you're going into your grocery store, they're there. You're going to pick them up.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it serves such an important role in communicating what's happening, because for a lot of people where English isn't their first language, it's really like operating it like sort of unaware.
Absolutely.
And so we need these community papers where they feel like connected, right? And no, I think that that's so important. So you are a like media warrior. I love the fact that you have been, advocating for making sure that funds get back to ethnic media. Is there anything else that you think would be really helpful in terms of supporting, apart from, subscribing, supporting the local paper, put an ad if you're a small business. Think about it in that way of like, it's kind of a return back to the community. Right?
That's it. And Lee, it's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that, right? Sharing your newspaper with a friend or a neighbor, discussing what's being written. The critical thinking piece is also extremely important. Even just communicating with the editor.
Okay.
And
that matters.
It matters. It really matters, right? Because if I'm sitting here in a little soapbox of my own and just writing away, I'm representing a community.
Right.
I want to know what's important to you.
Okay. So members of the community should because sometimes I feel like when you say editor, it feels like, ooh, this is like such a big person. Like, I don't even know if I should reach out to them, but it is actually the gateway.
Absolutely.
To express what's going on, what important needs are. And so that they stay on top of it. So they understand, it's like, I guess, a reciprocal relationship that
sure.
the media communicates what things to the community, but they also reflect what the community wants to see.
100%. Listen, if I lose your interest, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to be seen as a leader in the community, but I can only achieve that status if you're going to have trust and faith in me.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to be giving you something that is going to benefit you.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I guess something that I'm just thinking about now is like my father, he reads the Chinese newspaper. I can't read Chinese, so I don't actually read any of the Chinese papers, but it was always significant in my family because it was a part of us growing up.
Yes.
So for generations, so he came to Canada. I'm a first generation Canadian where I was born here.
Yes.
And English is really my primary language.
Yes.
So any tips on, first generation, second generation kids of ethnic communities, how they can stay engaged?
Absolutely. And again, that's another matter of reaching out to, the ethnic paper and saying, would you consider
Right.
adding a couple of English articles in this newspaper? Right. My family's really, really invested in the news that you produce.
Right.
It's important to me as well to keep that tradition alive. You would be surprised. More and more, we're seeing that within ethnic media where they're saying, you know what? This is great.
Okay.
Right? And a lot of that is centered around community events.
Okay.
So if I'm going to go to my local Greek dance and, the journalist is going to write about the party and what it's about and, what region of Greece it's representing. But I want my kids to also understand that, hey, you know what? Staying strong within your community is important.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another piece.
That's it. And just, again, support that newspaper. I mean, just thinking about the Chinese community. Tsingtao.
Yeah. Big, huge.
God. Online.
Yeah.
For Chinese seniors.
That's horrible.
Devastating. We have Ming Pao.
Yes.
I don't know if they're going to make it. And that's devastating again.
Those are like two major papers.
Yeah. And it's tough. And there's only so much that governments can do in terms of support.
Yeah.
So this really, really, really falls on the community. If it's important to you, it's important to your dad.
Yeah.
To grandma and grandpa.
Yeah.
Right? Words in this case are not enough. We need to support.
I'm just thinking about that, because, I guess you paid a little bit for Tsingtao, right? It wasn't that much, I think.
It was an arm of the Toronto Star. So I'm thinking, it could have been similar.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do you think there could ever be a comeback after it goes from paper to online?
That is, that's a hope that it would come back. I don't know, just because, the parent company is also struggling as well. These are really, really hard decisions. And I don't fault Torstar. I really, really don't. They're struggling with their own issues as well right now. So we can be hopeful.
I know. The paper's really thin.
Yeah. It's devastating. It really, really is devastating.
I know. That's why it's great to hear that there are some wins happening from a digital world, but it's kind of terrifying about the loss of the physical, right? And I don't know, it's ebbs and flows. I would hate to see us lose good journalism because what is it? You think about all these great shows and these anchors and who people are trusting and who go to. But if we don't have a field for them to grow in and to compete in, then you're limited with just one perspective.
Yeah. That's a very good point as well, right? Communities need opinions. They need different angles. That's how discussion happens. That's how it grows. Yeah. So once you start seeing one fall and then the possibility of another, right? And now I know in this particular example, we're focusing on daily newspapers, but there's a lot of weeklies as well.
Yeah.
And again, the pain is there.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah. And I don't think people always think about it. Like when you're at the grocery store, you're probably like freaking out about the rising costs of fruit and food and all that stuff. And you see the paper, you assume it's always going to be there. Oh yeah, there's the share or there's whatever. But then if it's all of a sudden, it's just no longer. Like we saw this happen with Now. Like, I mean, that was such a great, weekly. And it too had its own challenges and issues, right? And
oh, for sure.
So it's just really, sad that, and I know the people who worked behind it and worked so hard for it. And it was just so, hard to see the real lives being impacted by. They wanted to make a contribution and they did for decades and then out.
Gone. It affects people.
Yeah.
Personally. And, Brandon Gona's going in, hopefully gives it new life. I know he will. He is a superstar.
Yeah.
And, it's people like Brandon that also give me hope, right?
Okay.
Like they go out on their own and they've got this idea and then it's just
hard.
But he's growing. Like I'm just seeing his empire grow.
Okay.
Right. And that's where Heart and Soul comes into play, right? Which 100% of the ethnic media editors out there, they're not doing this to make money. Nobody's driving around in a Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
This is community love.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable just to see like the pain and anguish when I don't know how much longer I can do this. Like it's your heart. Like it's heartbreaking.
I mean, it's like what you were saying in the beginning where people are like, I've just had to take out a second mortgage so I can keep this going.
Absolutely. Like,
that they believe in their community so much and they believe just like your father did, like we need to be able to have media for us, for our community and grew that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So I think like the takeaway really is support local. Yeah. Don't assume that paper that you see this week is going to be there next week. Subscribe, share, write to the editor with any ideas, with any thoughts that you might have.
Contribute. Reach out to your editor and say, I've got this great idea.
Oh, contribute articles.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Absolutely. Like, I've got this great idea. Let me write it down. I get a lot of those and they're so fantastic. Like people don't think they can write, right? And you're just like, I never would have thought of this.
Okay,
like
cool.
Amazing ideas.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are their own content creators, but this is like a very validating, credible way of like, hey, I wrote, I published in, Singtao, or I published in whatever, So that's actually a really great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to read one thing that I thought was really great, which was your favorite quote, which is darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King Jr. Tell me why this is your favorite quote.
You know what? I just find that we're in a day and age right now where people are so divided and angry and hurt. And, instead of fighting back, right? Just being kind. Like all that is being kind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think a lot of people have lost that.
I hear you. I totally hear you. Something has changed, like in the way people engage and the way people interact. And kindness is like so small, but so much.
So much. It really, really makes a difference, right? We're all going through something. We really are.
Yeah. You can't judge people. Like you don't know what people are going through.
No. And just being kind and legitimately loving someone, whether you agree with them or not.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, at least for your own soul and your own peace,
it
makes a difference. Yeah. And hopefully you'll chip away at that anger and that anguish that other people are feeling.
Yeah.
Like none of it makes sense to me. None of it.
The division is what I think is really challenging because, I may have my own opinions, but I'm always open to like, I didn't actually think about it that way. Right? Tell me more. Right.
Absolutely.
And we live in a world where if you hold this opinion, then I'm diametrically opposed and we can't talk. I'm like, when did that happen? Like, isn't this about actually having democratic conversation and actually sharing ideas and saying, okay, I agree with that. I agree with that. But I think these silos and these channels and these echo chambers are really impacting it, where people are just like, no, we have to like abide by the same thing, tie our shoelaces the same way if we're going to walk together. Like, and I wish that wasn't like, I wish we could be a little bit more like, not as like, it's important to know who you are, but it's also important to listen. And in order for us to grow together, if that's any intent, is to share ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you know what? I'm going to learn a lot from you. Same goes you
I've
from
learned
me.
a lot from you. Yeah.
You know what I'm
sure.
saying? And it's everybody.
Yeah.
It's everybody, right? Like I'm a storyteller.
For sure.
So when I listen to people and I'm learning and I'm taking it in, and you know, there's times where I'm just like, whoa. But then I'm like, those are their shoes, right?
Yeah.
They're explaining this to me.
Yeah.
I may not agree with it.
Yeah.
But I'm here to listen.
Listening's a lost skill, isn't it?
It is done. It's just, I'm sad. So I'm going to ask you to bring on, it would be great to have a mental health professional come on here and talk about this very issue. Like, how can we, as a society, just something as simple as listening?
Yeah. Right? I do have someone coming up. So,
exciting. Okay, good.
Stay tuned.
All right, good.
I love it. You read my mind. I'm like, we totally need that.
I love it. Perfect.
Well, Maria, as always, thank you so much. I really appreciate your lens. I appreciate your advocacy. The fact that maybe you will have helped save ethnic media is really great, together with Mr. David Valentin. So,
love you, David.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a great conversation. And, you know, I appreciate any and every opportunity where I can talk about how important ethnic media is to Canada and to Canadians and the world.
Yeah, no, it's important. We have to hold that space, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
for sure. Thank you.
All right.